Welcome aboard the Hornet as we complete the last 45 degrees of our base landing turn to line up on the USS Theodore Roosevelt. Carrier landings require a lot of throttle inputs to maintain the proper rate of descent towards the deck. I thought this would be a great demonstration of my new VKB STECS throttle in action. I really like the smoothness of the throttle action and the accuracy of the adjustments as we enter the groove and start working on maintaining on speed and lineup. Watching the ball and adjusting the throttle to get it centered up.
Hornet ball.
355. Hornet ball. 3.7.
Roger ball.
Gotta keep adjusting to the right a little bit. And a little low. Yeah. One wire, but, well, hey, can't win them all, right? Still getting used to my new throttle. That's all I'll say.
Bingo. Bingo.
As we taxi out of the LA, let's talk about my new throttle. So this is the VKB STECS. And now STECS stands for Single Twin Engine Control System. And the Max, which I bought, has like basically everything you could possibly get. That's the standard throttle extension module on the front, and at the back is the auxiliary throttle extension module, those little buttons. It's kind of overkill for what I need, but it's pretty good. I mounted it onto my cockpit. It replaces my old Warthog throttle, which I've had forever. It's been great. The auxiliary throttle extension module is this little part here that's got the two flaps that cover buttons. It's kind of a neat little thing. You could put stuff, you can assign buttons there. That rotary knob acts as a rotary button in each direction. It also has press, and it also clicks left, right, up, and down. In addition, you also have the 4 other buttons that you can assign various functions to as needed. So on the right side of the throttle are the buttons you operate with your thumb. Those 3 buttons, the radio, brake, and op exec, those can all be swapped out with different styles. You can do just a push button. You can do a boat rocker switch, so 3 positions with that, plus a press. And you can change also the cap styles. So you can take off the castle ones that you see under like radio and put other types like that one under the op exec. I personally prefer the castle style ones. I just get a better orientation with them. The rotary knob at the bottom is an axis, so you can assign an axis function to it. I haven't found a use for it yet. That's that gray knob. And then towards the top of that image, you could see the TDC, or throttle designator controller. That is an axis as well that you would assign, obviously, for the TDC within your aircraft to move the cursors around and such. It also does have a press function. Now that's taken me getting some used to it. It comes to a point, whereas I'm accustomed to more of a flat type of button off of my old Warthog, but a lot of this is just muscle memory. Overall, it's great. I like being able to swap out different button styles. So overall, it's a nice little piece of gear. I'm happy. I don't think I'm going to find too much use for that front panel in VR. I thought I could. I wasn't too thrilled with the fact that the middle position of that bottom switch on the left doesn't register anything. Would have been handy, at least in the Hornet, for flap set to half. But it is what it is, and it's not too bad. I've been using the top one for landing gear, and up or down. It springs back to the middle position, and then that bottom switch I've been using for flaps. So that's pretty much it for just talking about the throttle. Here it is next to my Thrustmaster throttle. The throttles themselves are pretty much the same height overall when you have them side by side. The Thrustmaster has some additional switches on the base that are spread out a bit more. That's why it looks a bit bigger. It is the Thrustmaster one is definitely a lot heavier. It's all metal. The VKB STECS is primarily plastic, but that does not concern me. It is a very solid build, and it's not like you're going to be banging it and smashing it. At least you shouldn't be while you're using it. So I think it's got some good longevity in it. I think all of the important stuff that you'd want to have metal, I'm sure, are metal within it. So on the throttle, there's two things that look like finger lips on the front. Those are actually two buttons, and they're actually pretty handy. I was trying to figure out what to use them for, and I actually wound up finding use. But on the back, there's also two additional levers like that almost look like finger lips. They're not. They're just two buttons you can assign different functions to. I actually use those front ones for VR zoom and VR spyglass zoom, and it works really well. Those back ones are a little bit awkward to reach. So a great aspect of this throttle is your ability to customize it, and that includes setting up multiple detents. So I use two in my setup. I use one at the bottom for the engine cutoff, and that helps me when I'm doing a cold start or if I want to shut down. So at the bottom, I have a it's called a tall V detent, and I set that as low as I can. You can see here I have the bottom of that detent where the 0 is, and that allows me to pull the throttles all the way back and have the engines off, so that when I start up, I push past it, and that starts firing, with the right engine, and then I push the left throttle for the left engine. I also have an L shape at the top for the afterburner. And for this one, I don't set this in software. There's some software, and I'll show you that in a minute. I don't set this in software because I was having some weird issues. If you have these, you can play around with them. But I set this at the 80% spot. So you can see right there, that bottom of that detent is right at the bottom of the or right where the 80% is. And that, when I push forward, I get a nice resistance. I can feel the stop, and I push past it, and I go into afterburner. And then sliding back off, it comes up that slope, and it's very easy. It's a nice smooth transition out of afterburner. So to configure the detents, you use the VKB software, and you go in and you create a profile and then detents. And you can actually have different detent profiles. It's kind of a neat thing. So I'm using set number 2, for example. I set just one detent, that V, and when you're configuring it, you move the throttle, show it where it is. So I have it down at the bottom. And so when I pull that throttle back, it'll engage that detent and then come all the way down and pop past it. And that's when it can set the engines to off. So you pull past, boom. Now I'm outside of that detent, right? Now, a neat thing with this is you set up events. So when I say it's less than, so that's when it's below that detent, I want it to do something. And what I'm going to have it do is activate 2 buttons. And so you can assign these buttons different buttons. So if I have another detent, I could have, like let's say, instead of 89 and 90 for this, I'd have 91 and 92. And it's really quite easy. So when you're configuring a new detent, you just kind of go into there. It brings up the this little window. You select which buttons you want. Like if I was setting up another one, I do 91, and then 92 gets assigned automatically to the right button, right? And so what that does is in the game, it's going to use those values. So here's the buttons register test, and you'll see when I pull past, it illuminates buttons 89 and 90. Push forward, go past into afterburner, nothing happens because I don't have that configured, right? I just use that really more for a physical feel. But when I pull down to here, pull, boom, 89 and 90. Now I really like the ability to disengage or decouple the 2 throttles. The one on the Warthog was a royal nightmare, very finicky. This one just pops out, pops back in nice and cleanly. I love it. So what you're going to do, so you see when I pull down, that does buttons 89 and 90. So in DCS, you're going to go into DCS and you're going to select, you're going to go to configure and the controls, right? And then you want to find you want to find the throttle quadrant. Down a bit further. All right, there it is. And you see the throttle left, off, parentheses, hold, and then idle, and the one for the right. Those are where you assign the two buttons. So 89 was left, and you can see I pulled that throttle, and it engages that button, and 90 was right. So when I pull the right throttle down, it activates that button. So one thing you need to remember is that in the game, if you start with the throttle all the way back, like I have here, when you push forward, it doesn't move the throttles out of that parked position. You have to push it back down again, and then it'll work. See that? Yeah, works nicely. So if you start out and you forget that this is what I'm supposed to do, when you go to move the throttle, it doesn't move. You just need to push them back into the off position below that detent, and then it'll work. So I'm going to demonstrate that, and while I get the engines started up here on the deck, I'll show you just how well it works out. Always fun to watch this stuff going off on the deck, right? All right, so we get the right engine crank. Let that come up. Once we get to 25, I'm going to move that throttle to the idle position out of that bottom detent. All right, there we go. And now that RPM is going to continue to climb up to around 64-65%. And then I'll have a look down, and you'll see that that one throttle has moved forward, and then I can fire up the left one. All right, so one thing you definitely need to play with are your curves. Now, because of how I have that detent set at the bottom, the throttle doesn't travel all the way down to 0. And so therefore, if you park it just above the detent, where it should be idle, it's actually going to be running at around 67%. And you want to get it down to around 65%. So what I did was I did some user curves for both the left and right throttle. And you can see I set those two values to 100, and it flattens that bottom out. And then I kind of straighten the other one out. But so if we reset it, on this one throttle, I need to invert. But look, I pulled it all the way out down to the bottom, above the detent. It doesn't go to the far right edge. So you're never going to get idle. This is where you need to use user curves. And you set that other one to 100. And then just kind of play with this other one to straighten it out as best you can. It doesn't have to be perfect. And you're good. And that's it. That's all you need to do. So there you have it. Overall, I really enjoy my new throttle. I really did enjoy the Warthog. I just find the new throttle is much smoother. I like the added buttons.
Ready pre-contact.
Ready, pre-contact.
And just the feel.
Ready pre-contact.
Ready, pre-contact. 311 Cleared contact.
I also like that I can swap the buttons around for different styles. I would like to have had more three-way hat rockers, but it only came with one, and that's good enough. I'm figuring out how to get accustomed to stuff. The biggest obstacle for me is just muscle memory. I think getting the max for myself was overkill. Because I have point control, I don't need physical switches. I've been trying to force myself to use the switches on that flat panel, or that panel in the front of the throttle for flaps and gear, because that's always a bit fun when I'm coming into landing, or if I'm when I first shoot off the carrier, having to look down and kind of take my eyes off the road, so to speak, right? and flip those switches. But that's kind of tough because I've been spending years just using point control to just look down and flip the switches virtually with it. So in the end, I could have just done with just that basic throttle base. I might have got that one, the additional panel that you can see to the right of the throttle that has some extra buttons, because I do like having that for active pause or exit game. That's what I have under the two little, lift the flaps to press the button type things. And I'll probably find some uses for the other 4 buttons. So yeah, overall, it's a solid little piece of kit. I do recommend, if you're out looking for a new throttle, to give this some consideration. There's a lot out there. Obviously, WinWing has their various throttles, which look kind of nice. Verpil has their throttle. I guess Thrustmaster even came out with theirs, kind of late to the game with the F16 throttle, but well, they have it. So it's kind of a nice problem to have, lots of choice. Now, hopefully this helped you out. If you ever have any questions about this, just feel free to ask in the comment section, and I can do my best to answer you or point you in the right direction, as I always try to. And have fun. Getting a new throttle, it's kind of like getting a new joystick base. It makes a world of difference. It's a nice smooth action, as you can see here. It's really able to keep position with the tanker. It's a worthy investment. So you take care, and I'll see you out there.